right now, probably.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for him.
Super, thank you.
Okay, so I think we may be live. That's what it's all making me feel like. Okay.
It's making you feel alive?
It's making me feel alive, yeah.
That's good.
Well, it is just about 7 o'clock here on Wednesday, February 10th. Some of us are in beautiful Cannon Beach, Oregon. Well, you know, it's dark out, so it was a beautiful day. Nice and chilly, but really calm waves out there. So it was absolutely gorgeous. Got some great photos of the rock, and there were a few boats just off the shore. It was wonderful. Some of us are elsewhere around the world, and we have a couple folks joining us in just a minute that can tell us more about what it's like where they were from, because I know we all enjoy talking about the weather, especially when it's supposed to be snowy, like it could potentially be this weekend here in Cannon Beach and also other places along, throughout Oregon. So just a couple housekeeping items before I pass it over. So the first thing is that the Friends of Haystack Rock collaborated with OPB for a piece about tufted puffins. Recently, there was an article and a short video that went out a couple months ago, and they are going to air the full video on the Oregon Field Guide on February 18th. And we'll make sure to post that on our Facebook page. I'm really excited about it. The section that they posted was fantastic, and I look forward to seeing more. So that's the first thing. The next thing is that, as I mentioned in our last library lecture, that this is the year of the puffin 2021. So we'll have events and opportunities to learn more about puffins as we go along, because tufted puffins are a really cool species. We are looking forward to seeing them out here April through August. If you get a chance to come out to the Oregon coast, then you may spot one. They're a fun little bird to watch, and I can't wait until they come back. Counting down the days. We also have our photo contest, which ends on April 1st. So make sure to get your photos in. You can find out more about that in our newsletter, the Friends of Haystack Rock newsletter, as well as on our Facebook page. We do have information about that. And Tiffany, can you remind us of what our topic is for this photo contest? She can unmute herself. Tell us. Okay.
So, sorry. So this quarter's contest is kind of up for your guys' interpretation. It's winter at sea, because the tufted puffins, we know that they go out to sea in the winter, but we don't really know what they do. So it's kind of a free-for-all, up to you guys what you think winter at sea would kind of look like.
Thank you, Tiffany. So definitely, if you have an idea of what maybe a tufted puffin sees in their winter at sea, submit your photos to our photo contest. That again ends April 1st. March 27th, the Friends of Haystack Rock does several beach cleanups with Solve, which is a great organization that works to clean up Oregon. And so we'll be doing that first beach cleanup March 27th. So make sure to sign up for that. And that, of course, will be on our Facebook and newsletter and all that as well. And if you aren't part of our newsletter, make sure to sign up for it. You can go onto our website, the Friends of Haystack Rock at .org, I believe is our website. Really easy to find, and you can sign up for a newsletter there, or you can direct message the Facebook page, and we can make sure to get your email added to that list. A couple other things. So the Haystack Rock Awareness Program, we are close partners with, and they are doing their first day at the beach this Friday from 4 to 5:30. So if you're in Cannon Beach, stop by and say hi and, welcome them back to the beach. And then we'd also like to thank all of our partners for working with us on events like this, our library lecture series. So the Cannon Beach Library is where we normally do this event. Of course, that's not really an option at the moment, but you know, we're always happy to partner with them, as well as the Friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve. So thank you all for joining us. And Margaret, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Hannah. And thank you to Friends of Haystack Rock for letting us from Friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve co-host tonight. My name is Margaret Treadwell, and I'm the program coordinator for Friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve. And our organization works to create awareness and understanding of Oregon's marine reserves, and in particular, the Cape Falcon Marine Reserve, which is one of 5 marine reserve sites in our state, managed coastal waters, and these areas have been designated for conservation of biodiversity and as living laboratories for scientific research. And Cape Falcon Marine Reserve is the northernmost marine reserve located in Oregon's ocean between Cannon Beach and Manzanita. And it's adjacent to Oswald West State Park and also the proposed rainforest reserve that North Coast Land Conservancy is working on. And all those conserved areas together, the ocean and the forests conserved next to each other, really strengthens the resilience of all of those conserved ecosystems working together and allowing those land-sea connections of our environmental processes along the coast to occur relatively unimpeded by human disruption. So it's a really powerful place to have a marine reserve there next to Oswald West and the Rainforest Reserve. Our role is to support the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife in outreach and education about the Marine Reserve. They have a very small Marine Reserve staff, so it's really important work that we do out here on the coast. And we do our work through guided hikes, lectures, community science projects, and boat tours, and these days, a lot of virtual events. So we have volunteer opportunities to participate in projects like seabird monitoring and an intertidal BioBlitz. And we actually have an event coming up on March 30th, where that'll give a fun overview of the community science opportunities in our area. And so if that sounds like something interesting to you or might be interesting to you, tune into that to find out more. So if you're interested in learning more or getting involved with us, you can visit our website at nehalemtrust.org/CapeFalconMR or email me at capefalconmr@gmail.com. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Duncan Berry, who's our speaker tonight. Duncan Berry grew up up here on the Clatsop Plains on the North Oregon coast, the son of an author, father, and photojournalist mother. And he began his fishing career at the age of 13 as a pooler on his brother's salmon trawler out of the Columbia River. He went on to captain the boat when he was 16 and then pursued other careers for the next 40 years, including making a living as a goldsmith and enamelist, starting and running a design and exhibits firm, entering the fashion business and creating international brands in conventional and organic cotton. And during the same span of time, he lived on Vashon Island off of Seattle and raised a family there. And then in 2006, returned to the Oregon coast to form a nonprofit to preserve a large property at Cascade Head named Westwind. And Cascade Head is actually the name of the Marine Reserve just to the south, the next one down the coast from us. In 2012, Duncan re-entered the fisheries business as co-founder of Fishpeople, which is now a national brand distributing value-added seafood products, and it has landings in Ilwaco and Garibaldi. And do you still have a landing in the Yukon? Is that correct?
No, we don't.
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah, we've come back to the lower 48.
Got it. He also currently writes poems and sea shanties about his life with fish, time spent on or under the water, as well as being crazy, in your words, about the Japanese technique of Gyotaku, or fish printing. And he loves to swim with salmon in the upper reaches of coastal rivers and is a dedicated conservationist, believing that native species are the key to our iconic salmon's future here in the Great Northwest. So without any further ado, you can take it over, Duncan. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Margaret. Actually, I'm all done. Are there any questions? That was quite a lengthy introduction. I can't add anything to that.
You're an interesting guy.
Anyway, well, thank you, Margaret. I'm actually coming to you live tonight from, as Margaret said, the Marine Reserve right off of Cascade Head. So I'm looking out my window at the sodium vapor lights of the crab fishermen that are probably out of Newport that are just offshore here. And I also am standing on the 45th parallel in a place that most people don't know is here, but Oregon has its very own United Nations Biosphere Reserve at Cascade Head. And it's the only one in Oregon and one of the last few remaining ones on the West Coast. So coming to you live from a very special biological jewel here at the mouth of the Salmon River. I wanted to thank some of tonight's sponsors that have been working hard putting this on, specifically the Friends of Haystack Rock and the Friends of Cape Falcon. They're lucky, both those places are lucky to have friends. And then also just the library at Cannon Beach. Thank God for all our libraries, and soon we'll be able to go back to them, hopefully. So thank you all three of you. So I wanted to, I was given a theme of seeking balance through sustainable fishing. And so I've spent the last decade of my life dedicated to, we founded a seafood company called Fishpeople, saying to ourselves, the world doesn't need another seafood company, it needs a different one. And so we became the first B Corp seafood company in the world, which sounded great and rolled off the tongue, but actually was a lot more work than we ever bargained for. But we feel is the future of any natural resource extraction business. So if you don't know about B Corps, we're going to talk about them in a minute, but research them, because I think it's the future of business on the planet if we're going to make it. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and screen share and take you on a little ride through a PowerPoint I have here. And then please jot down any questions or save them in your head, because I'd love to do leave quite a bit of time at the end for any Q&A we might have. This is going to be a multimedia event here with both imagery and some things for your head, but also hopefully for your heart and your gut. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a little bit here. So, seeking balance through sustainable fishing. This is a picture of a gentleman that works for us on our dock in Ilwaco with 2 MSC certified fish. Those are albacore, 2 to 3 years old, sustainably harvested and monitored as one of the healthiest tuna stocks in the world. And this is some of our dock workers, again in Ilwaco, not far from Astoria, just to the west. And these are the 3 questions that the team put to me tonight. So what is sustainable fishing? And I will say that we're going to explore that word sustainable a little bit, because it means about 7.8 billion different definitions to sustainable on this planet. It means a little something different to everybody. How does Fishpeople practice this method of fishing? And then how does it benefit coastal communities and ecosystems? So that's really what we're going to explore tonight. So first off, what is sustainable fishing mean? And the UN's World Commission on the Environment and Development have defined sustainability in a lot of the environmental definitions for us worldwide. And I think they've come up with a pretty good one here for fishing as well. So sustainable fishing employs only those harvest methods which meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. When they wrote it, they meant humans, but I put in fish and humans to meet their own needs, because we are deeply, deeply interdependent. So I think sustainable fishing practices also has further dimensions. Yes, ecological, yes, human, deep economic health. One of the things that I underscore in a lot of my talks is the fact that actually I seem to be in a position of leverage as a captain of industry, when really the leverage is in your hands. You who are viewing me speaking here as a talking head have the power because you're a consumer. And unfortunately, in a lot of the work that's done on the environment, the consumer is not factored and is not enlisted and enrolled. So the whole reason we formed Fishpeople was to enroll the gorilla in the room, which is, last time we checked, humans were eating all those fish. They weren't just disappearing somewhere else. Although 25% of them are fed to cattle, but then those cattle are also eaten by us. So you have the power, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about that as we go. So sustainability presumes that resources are finite and should be used conservatively and wisely with a view to long-term priorities and consequences. So I am a grandfather and I have 2 children as well. And really, in the simplest terms, sustainability is about them living a similar life and having a similar lifestyle and a relationship with the ocean. Hopefully, I have some faith that it will be better than ours, but climate change is coming at us fast, and we're going to talk about that too in a moment. So I may be wrong in the end. So I don't know how many of you know the work of a botanist by the name of Robin Kimmerer, but she's a Native American botanist on the East Coast, teaches as a professor, full professor. And she, her work, Braiding Sweetgrass and Gathering Moss, are just phenomenal books. If you haven't read them, they've changed my worldview in about 45 minutes. Just amazing work. But in it, she tells a story about the word sustainability, and that she was explaining it to, there was a friend of hers who was wanting to go to a conference. And so she went to the elders and said, you know, I'd like to be able to buy a plane ticket and go to this conference on sustainability. And they went, what's sustainability? And so she told them, and they were very polite and they nodded their head and they said, yeah, we think you should go. But to us, it sounds like just another reason or explanation for taking. And that really sunk in for me, because sustainability has always been a big part of my life and a real aspiration and goal. And for them, it wasn't a relationship. It was us defining and controlling our own extraction. I thought that was very interesting. And so one of the things that my partner, Kipp Baratoff, and I, and Kipp may be able to join us here before we're through, is the difference between sustainability and resilience. And it's a slightly different worldview. Now, this is one of the last characters you'd think I'd be bringing up during a sustainability talk, but Charles Darwin said something I think really fascinating, and he's famous, and I think he turns over in his grave for being, oh, it's the strongest and the fittest that shall survive. And really, what he said was, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change. So if you think of that saying in the light of resilience, resilience is defined as the capacity of an ecosystem to respond to a disturbance by resisting damage or change and recovering quickly. And you know, we are in a time of resilience, I think, as a species. There's a virus, 1/10,000th the size of a grain of sand, that has brought our entire economic, cultural, societal structures to its knees. If it had its way and it was unbridled, it would eradicate humans. So we are resilient in our response to that virus, and we've all been resilient in different ways, or not. But that is a disturbance that entered our ecosystem. So we, humans, alpha predators, are a disturbance in oceanic systems. And that happens in two ways. And we're going to really delve into both of them. But one is overfishing and one is climate change. So I would hold that the question shouldn't be how much can we take, or even the methods we use to take it, which is really what we focus on when we talk about being a sustainable seafood company or being a B Corp. We're measured for all those things. So how much and the method. I would hold it's rather what can we do to enable the ocean as a system and these species in specific that we're talking about to achieve a state of resilience. So how does Fishpeople practice sustainable fishing? So I'm going to go to some practical aspects of how we filter the world. Don't know how many of you are familiar as a consumer or potentially fisher folk that are on the broadcast tonight, but there's a Marine Stewardship Council is seen as the greatest sort of filter for sustainable fishing. It's the good housekeeping seal for an actual audited regime that can verify that when they say a stock is sustainable, that there's a multi-point measurement process and field audits that occur. We call our 9 principles for sustainable sourcing sort of MSC plus. And so we have these 9 filters that we have used for every single product that we have created. And we have both products that we sell directly to food service across our docks, but also in the past, we've now removed most of them from the consumer market, but we've marketed a great many products directly to consumers throughout the grocery store chains of over 50 states and 10,000 points of distribution. But we applied all of these. So never harvest over exploited stocks. We are very fortunate in Oregon to live in one of what marine biologists call one of the last great savannas of seafood. This is like the Serengeti Plains. Now, there's been some abuse of species here, but in general, there's still a lot of system health. So we don't have a lot of overexploited stocks. We do have some, and some have recovered, but that's just a baseline. Reducing bycatch. So those species that were not targeted, that are then wasted, is just an incredible sin, really. Protect marine and terrestrial habitats. Destroying the very habitat that nurtures wild capture does not create ecosystem health, and especially in the face of climate change, resilience comes from the health of the entire ecosystem. Thinking local. I guess that says it all, but again, marine ecosystems are complex, and the science used to manage them is imperfect given the scale upon which we must operate to balance cost, time, and credibility. Quality creates value. So this doesn't come up much when you talk about sustainability, but commodity economics, most of the fish caught here on the West Coast is shipped we act like a third world country. We ship it overseas to be value improved somewhere else. So our whole point as a company was we're making meals, not shipping fish. We should be building furniture, not shipping logs. Promise purity. There's a lot of stories, almost every day you see stories about what's, the fish aren't the fish they say they are. They contain a lot of chemicals and preservatives. We are 100% in what we call relentlessly transparent. People are not relentlessly transparent who are hiding anything. Review and adapt. So what we thought was the way to go a year ago may have changed. So be resilient and adaptable like Darwin asked us to be. There's a human component. One of the greatest tragedies of the last decade was actual human supply chain, a human portion of the supply chain in Hawaii, of all places. That's America, last time I checked. So the fact that we think this is only happening in far off corners in foreign countries, it's not true. So we must maintain human rights and fair labor. And then lastly, no IUU fishing. And this is just a fancy acronym for illegal, unreported, or unregulated fishing. And again, we have one of the best regulated fisheries in the world, but it still occurs here. It's rampant in other areas, and it damages ecosystems in great swaths if it's not daylighted and regulated. So that's a very wonky 9-point jump into how we define sustainability and resilience. So the why behind what we do. I mentioned earlier, we're the first seafood B Corp in the world. So what that means practically is that rather than just the tail of the fish, we're concerned about profit. We are also the rest of the fish we think about as well. And that is, in every decision we make as a company, we're considering people, planet, and profit. So what is a B Corp? It's, I believe, as I said earlier, the future of business. Here's a lot of companies that you may recognize. And each one of these companies, along with ourselves, we have to answer 200 questions a year regarding our governance of how we run the company, our workers' salaries, etc., community, the community that we're embedded in, and the environment. That must be answered every single year, and it generates a score. And if you fall below a certain level, you can no longer put that B Corp sticker on your packages. So it's a very rigorous way of being checked. So I wanted to just transition to some of the sources where we have either sourced or are sourcing all our fish. And Ilwaco, just west of Washington, is our largest port. We have both a seafood market there as well as a big landing where we land a great deal of the crab and tuna that's brought ashore here in the state. Garibaldi, Oregon, where again we have a market and a landing. And then in Alaska, where for years we've sourced most of our salmonids and our cod. So this is a variety of different places that we either have or are now harvesting, and these are our principal species. So this gets back to a point that I mentioned just a little bit earlier. We are the alpha predators on this planet. So what we consume and how we use this gray matter that's above our necks here has a massive, massive ripple effect. Each and every one of us, as you know, I love this name, consumers, has a powerful influence on this issue of sustainability. So what I do is I flip it around and almost like to give you guys the mic and say, tell me about your lifestyle. Tell me about your relationship with the sea, because multiplying you by 300 and some odd million people in the United States alone, it's a very, very powerful lever. So in the spirit of that, I'm going to mix it up here, and we're going to go from using our heads to maybe using our hearts a little bit more. And I'm going to read you a piece dictated to me by a 30-pound Chinook salmon hen. And she wanted me to speak in a human voice for her. So here goes. I am salmon. I am salmon, my body the elegant result of millions of years of trial and error, adapting to mountain ranges that have come and gone, rivers once flowing now dry, rocks made and unmade, and me still here. I am salmon, and my body is a simple miracle, red of gill, iridescent of scale, muscled for bursts and glides, small white ear bone in my head bearing witness to it all. Annular rings written in calcium and mineral molecules, the origins of my mother and father, what river birthed me, what I ate and when and where. And this, only one page in the book that I am. And you two-legged ones, you of chainsaws and dams and sharpened hooks and strong nets, you who we call the salmon eaters, who amongst you could survive being dropped from your mother's belly onto clean black rock into the cold rush of oxygen-rich waters, emerging with only an egg sac at your belly for a jump start and nothing more? tumbling down tributaries into estuaries where the tang of salt burns your gills, spit out the mouth of the river into the great liquid canyons of the continental shelf with its rich legions of eulachon, sand lance, anchovy, and herring. Who amongst you could return from a great arc to the north, looping back 4 years later in a navigational miracle to the very river of your birth, feeling your flesh pulled from your bones, no food in your belly, single-minded purpose of passing the genetic baton in the perfect tiny red spheres? Who amongst you? And in the midst of all this mighty race run, we give you humans our all, gifting you with our bodies from time immemorial. And all that we ask in return is that when you take our brilliant flesh into your bodies, raising us to your lips, that you pause and remember the mythic arc of our lives, from the river's stone cradle into the deep sea and back. Remember that you are consuming this optimism and persistence and selflessness of ours. We salmon, becoming human. And all we ask in return is to honor our gift by making the work you do in the world extraordinary, burning us as bright, rich fuel so that the work you do in the world is extraordinary. I am salmon. So these are some Chinook that are pooling in Drift Creek on their way up to those very beds that I talked about in the poem. So I'm going to transition up here. While I've shown you that we are a why-driven company, we often say to each other, no margin, no mission. And so what do we mean by that? If we aren't successful in solving a consumer need, we don't get the lever to pull for our mission and to succeed in changing fisheries as they are today. Unless, again, we're appealing in some way and solving a consumer need. So what I wanted to show you is how we went about doing that in such a way that there was integrity and transparency. So here's some of our portions that we do. We do a wide range of different portions. And as you can see, we trace this fish, we provide a code. It takes you to a really rich story about Lars Holmdahl. He and one of his daughters caught and do catch a lot of albacore tuna here. And then we talk about the process in which it was caught. I do all the product development for our company, so I also put in eatability little references in here for people regarding the taste, the color, and the why. So this is part of us appealing to and solving questions and problems and desires of our consumer. We also created this full line of products, and I've worked almost the past 10 years on these. So the far left is from scratch. So you're doing all the cooking yourself, and that's what we just saw. We call speed scratch, which is these kits that we provided. We then do ready set salmon, which is a cool smoked and sliced salmon that it's a lot like a deli meat, but just really ocean-based instead. And then the place we started, and my wife and I cooked the first of these soups in our own kitchen here, and then have produced millions of them since. We have had 6 different flavors. And then finally, salmon jerky. So we entered the snacking market. Again, this is our ticket to entry. If we want to change fisheries, let's change the innovation that goes on, and let's ship meals, not headed and gutted frozen tuna or salmon overseas. And this involves all kinds of machinations and staff and overhead. And this is 5 strategies to drive the brand awareness around our brand, just so that we could reach more consumers and have a bigger lever on for our mission. So this is just an an example of all the different machinations that a brand has to go through. When you walk through a grocery store, multiply this by the thousands, and there's people out there laboring every day to bring you your food. No brand survives without being active socially. So we had some young, very social people working for us. And this is just a little bit of what they were working on. That's our Fintern, who came from OSU and worked with us. Anyway, just another example of what you must do in order to earn your stripes as a brand. So this is the last question that was asked of me. And that was, okay, so how does the sustainable fishing we're talking about actually translate to coastal communities and ecosystems? So in terms of humans, this is one of our vessels that we actually own. That's both a tuna vessel and in this case, a crabbing vessel. This is them outside Newport, and a vessel called the Sunset Charge. So we directly support 400 families on the Oregon coast, and in Washington, in very southern Washington. And that's a lot of families that are dependent on the natural resources of the Pacific coast. And it's the lifeblood of many of these coastal counties that otherwise don't have a lot of forms of income. So 25% plus of total household income in some counties. I live in one. So if the fish disappear, if we don't harvest them sustainably, then you'll start seeing that those families drop off and move elsewhere or do something else. So in human terms, the sustainability of the fish stocks is the sustainability of families. We were talking a little bit earlier about marine reserves and their impact on fisheries. Throughout the world, we've seen these perimeter effects of systems that are left to rest become more fertile and productive. And so I have personally experienced in 7 different countries marine reserves, most of which are protected by the locals, not necessarily even their governments, just because they see the fecundity and the fertility of those locations, not only to attract people to come there without extraction, but also as an incubator for commercial stocks as well. Now, I've chosen the puffin since it's a special month for them, and they survive largely on forage fish. This is an amazing bird to be able to capture that much food in one capture, but you can see why if they swim through this this school of sand lance, which is a lesser known forage fish. You're probably more familiar with anchovy and herring, but the sand lance are an amazing oil-rich creature that is depended upon by literally thousands and thousands of species, the puffin just being one. So when we talk about the effect of sustainability on ecosystems, I think of these fish along with zooplankton and phytoplankton. They form the foundation of the house. So it doesn't matter what walls or windows or roof you put on it, it's got to have a good foundation. And so we did not protect this part of the foundation until 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, when finally the Forage Fish Conservation Act was passed by Congress. But this will have a profound effect on the overall food web along the West Coast, because there won't be indiscriminate and large taking of forage fish. It's a regulated fishery now, and it has a rebound effect. That their health has a ripple effect across all these other species. So it is just one example of how important sustainability is. It's not a Republican or a Democratic issue. It's a human and the natural systems that we depend upon issue. And this is just one case. You might say, okay, so how do we depend upon these sand lance? Well, I'm sure that most of you have eaten salmon in your life, or lingcod, or halibut. And these are all species that at one time or another feed on these rich, beautiful foundational fish. So human seafood harvests, which we've been talking about, and climate change are the two greatest stressors and challenges to this resilience that we've been talking about in the ocean. And so if you'll be patient with me, I'm going to take you on another journey through a poem called Misbehaving. And I thank a gentleman who was sort of he was a guru to me about ocean systems and what we're going through. And he came to talk at Fishpeople one day, and I saw him come early, and he was on his laptop in his car, and he came in, and his face was streaked with tears. His eyes were red. And I said, you doing okay? And he goes, yeah, I've just been looking at data preparing for my presentation to you. And the ocean is here off the Pacific coast is having a heart attack. So I'm going to just read a quick excerpt from this poem. It's called Misbehaving. I was talking to the head of research for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration a while back, and I told him I didn't realize someone was actually administrating the oceans and the weather. Huh, how's that going for you? Sounds like that could be a really big and frustrating job. We were talking about the effects of climate change when I noticed his eyes were rimmed in red like he'd been crying, and his face said sad as he looked at me and said, Duncan, the North Pacific is misbehaving. He was talking about the heartbeat of a massive system that gives us everything we know of as life tucked up here in the northwest corner of the left coast. A heartbeat that has been in a dynamic balance with its warm and cold cycles, decadal in its oscillation from time immemorial, dependably ebbing and flowing, bump, 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 until it started this atrial flutter, this watery arrhythmia, a year of cold currents out of the north bringing rich nutrients, zooplankton like cheeseburgers, he said, erratically followed by 2 years of warm currents like popcorn, he said. Boom and bust years of feed for our beloved salmon. I remember thinking, no wonder they don't show up sometimes. And then the fever began, and the blob came to town and wore out its welcome real quick, refusing to budge. Millions of square miles of deep water are hard to heat up in even a single Fahrenheit degree, but 10? He tells me that with these new temperatures, phytoplankton bloom in epic rashes and die. Zooplankton head down to lower ranges deep beneath the surface where billions of creatures that depend upon them can't reach. And in a deja vu all over again moment, just like our fisheries sisters and brothers in the Northeast waters, we lost the privilege to fish our cod stocks in the Gulf of Alaska from one year to the next. Bam! Just like that. And the beach in front of my house received a message in the form of a 17-year-old teenage gray whale that had died of starvation. Remember those zooplankton diving? And he was unable to make the trip back up the hill. And one day last summer, we had 28 Dorado show up on our docks in Garibaldi. Dorado. And in the same week, 2 sailfish and a 90-pound bluefin with 2 coho in its stomach. The underwater sonar showing schools of these southern monsters traveling our northern waters like herds of invading buffalo. And I spoke with another Yoda of the sea who's a visionary oceanographer at the Oregon State University, who told me that human contributions to CO2 emissions in the northern hemisphere absorbed into the sea northeast of Japan's coastline, traveling here underwater on a slow-moving freight train of a current that takes over 30 years to arrive. We're talking about game-changing foundation of the house stuff here. Like if zooplankton can't make their shells, well, then we best be getting out the PB&J, because we are all toast. So that's just a quick excerpt of how our ocean is going through a very staggering amount of change in a very short period of time. So in wrapping things up, Margaret had mentioned that I practice a form of art called Gyotaku, which means fish rubbing. And this is me in my studio, and this is my active form of reverence. And when I get really disturbed by such facts as I just read to you, I go out and I revere the ocean through being able to run my hands like braille over these incredibly beautiful fish. And so if anyone would like to check out some of my work, I put together a show at the River Sea Gallery, and it'll be opening this Saturday, and it'll run through March 9th. And I was imagining someone from the Kalahari asking me, what's it like to live in Oregon, and what lives there? And so this whole show is dedicated to life at the wild edge, and it has creatures from the land, the sea, and the air here where we all live. So thank you for being patient with my multimedia presentation.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. We got a lot of response to the poems, and people really enjoyed them. And we do have a question of who is the author, and I believe the author is you.
In both cases, yeah. Well, the first one was a Chinook salmon, but I was the stenographer for that one.
Right, right. Thank you for sharing those with us. So if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and post them in the chat, in the comments on Facebook. Just for starters, I was curious what motivates a fisherman to work with Fishpeople rather than more conventional approaches?
You know, I'd like to say it was because I think all of them have one thing in common. Some of them come to us because we are a different seafood company, and they really appreciate our morals and our ethics, and the fact that we're talking about their story to the consumer. I think every one of them appreciates that part of it. I think really it boils down to the fact that we have some amazing dock masters, and they have developed deep, respectful relationships, because all of these are independent. We call them cowboys and cowgirls of the sea. You know, I mean, they are super independent, and they can go anywhere they want to sell their fish, and they choose people who are square with them and respectful, and get them on a dock and back out to sea again quickly. We do laundry for them. We do shopping for them. We really understand that we're in a deep relationship with them, and I think that more than anything really deeply means something to them. Occasionally we'll pay more for a higher quality or for sustainably harvested fish, but primarily it's driven by the strength of doing what we said we do when we say we do it, and giving them a ton of respect, because they literally, we can sit there and have our little crab cocktail, and they have risked their lives every single day so we can sit there and enjoy seafood. They deserve respect.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We got a question from Cheryl asking if you see any IUU fishing in our area.
Yes, there are some amazing stories. And you see some of them in the news, and some you never hear about. There was one where there's a gentleman who actually sold crab to us at one point, who went and stole other people's pots and reset them in a marine reserve, which is just like, if you wanted to go to jail really quickly, that's what you do. And so that is definitely unregulated. One, stealing other people's pots. Two, putting them in a place where there's supposed to be no biological, and it wasn't an MPA. It was in the reserve itself. So that person will probably never fish again. But yeah, I mean, there are bad characters everywhere. I think there are less here just because they know they can't get away with it as much. But again, one of the largest sting operations in the world a couple years ago was Hawaiian fisheries. So even in a place that's highly regulated, it still goes on. There's still bad actors.
Mm-hmm.
There's not very much of it here, I will say that.
Yeah, it's interesting. That case with the crab pots was in Cape Falcon Marine Reserve,
Yep.
and was actually discovered when a charter boat or when a boat operator, when a captain was taking a researcher out to do research on Dungeness crab, and
See,
they stumbled upon these pots.
here it is.
Yeah.
That one just was, everybody in the industry kind of just shook their heads like, wow, really?
So we had some questions about your art. One being, where can we read your poetry?
You know, I get that question a lot. I have a website called bylandbyseabyAir.com, and it has two of my three forms of art, and that is aerial and landscape photography and my Gyotaku. But I don't have a place to where my poems are other than on the Fisher Poets site. So fisherpoets.org. As I'm a reader every year, we're going to be virtual this year. But I have over 100 poems about life here on the West Coast, and about a dozen are on the Fisher Poet site in a place called In the Tote. But I think I'm inspired. Thank you for the question, because I'm inspired, I think, to put a section up on my website and just try to share my view of the world through these poems.
Absolutely, that's a great idea. Let's see. Tasha wanted to know, what kind of fish do you use for the fish rubbing, for the fish prints, besides salmon?
Wow. I could show you a log of my freezer. Things that I've caught, things I found washed up, things that I've purchased in the market. It runs anywhere from those little sand lance that we were talking about. I print those sand lance. I print a lot of seaweed. All the species that come across the dock. My favorite I just printed last night was is a 30-pound halibut that I combined with some feather boa seaweed. Rockfish are the simplest. If anybody wants to do their own, rockfish are just full of texture, and they print beautifully. The largest, I just finished printing the 9-foot tail of a thresher shark. And the most difficult fish, I guess, the two most difficult things to print are large octopus and albacore tuna, because they're shaped like footballs. So you've got a piece of paper that's flat, and you've got a fish that's extremely dimensional. And so very few people ever print those, but it's one of my specialties, because I like it to be tough, and I love those fish. I love albacore.
Great. Where can we see some of the prints?
So bylandbyseabyAir.com is the best place. I've got probably 100 or more prints. I just released a new group called a Black Series there. Also, if you're in Lincoln City, they're carried at Scout. I have a large exhibition at the Oregon Coast Aquarium, and in their gift store, they also sell it. So a couple of places, and then, River Sea and Astoria for the next one. Fantastic.
Yeah. Let's see. I did have one more question. So you emphasized that a lot of the ability to do sustainable fishing relies on the consumer. So on people actually caring and wanting to buy sustainable products. So how do people, what kind of resources are there available for people to make those kinds of decisions? And where does one go to purchase sustainably sourced products, both yours and just in general?
Wow, that's a great question. I think there's a couple different levels and a couple different ways to answer that. One is, how far did it come? Who touched it? Do you know the person who touched it? Are you lucky enough to be able to actually have a relationship with a fisher or with someone very close to a fisher? That's a really important thing. Here on the coast, we're pretty lucky that way. So how far did it travel, and do you have a relationship? I think are really critical parts of sustainability. And then as it gets farther away from you, and if it's coming from a farther away place, things like MSC are viable and real. Blue Ocean Institute, I think, is the very finest example of a regime. And then if you want to have something that's very consumer friendly, I think Seafood Watch through the Monterey Bay Aquarium is very handy. I don't always agree with their some of their ratings. I was a commercial fisherman for years, and I caught salmon in the ocean. They say green lights, fantastic. Well, I was catching Sacramento fish, which are endangered, and I was catching Columbia River fish, or salmon river fish for that matter. And so these one size fits all sort of regimes like MSC, that's why I really underscore this local idea. And you could go to Fred Meyer and say, tell me a little bit more about this fish. And you'll find out very quickly how much they know about that fish, whether it was sustainably harvested, where it came from. The more you know, the more you get, the more you can trust the source of fish. Fish is very valuable, so people tend to be, it tends to attract some dishonesty. Ask for transparency most of all, and then as much, and get that fish as close to its source as you can.
Great, thank you so much. We're just about ready to wrap up here. We're almost at the end of the hour. We did have a comment from Elizabeth saying this was a very inspiring talk. Many thanks to Duncan, Barry, and Fishpeople for setting the standard for sustainable fishing. And I also want to thank you for joining us. We typically have maybe things that are a little bit more scientists presenting what they have found from their research, but I was really compelled by this angle because I think it's so important for people to learn how to use the resources from the environment in a sustainable or resilient way so that everything can be healthy. And I really appreciate what you're doing to move us in that direction and move our community in that direction and support the community and protect those fish so we can keep on eating them and so that the fish can keep having their generations. So thank you.
Margaret, thank you. I wanted to leave you with a thought from the same Robin Kimmerer, and that is, we often ask what the world can gift us with, but reciprocity is really important. So what do we have as a consumer and as a person? What's our relationship with the ocean? And what gifts can we give it back? Is not a question we ask very often. So I ask myself that every day now.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Thank you so much. Tiffany, did you have anything to wrap up with?
Well, I just want to thank you both so much for joining us, friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve and Duncan from Fishpeople. It was a fascinating talk, and we really appreciate you guys taking the time to join us. Just last thing, so next month, if you want to join us for our World of Haystack Rock Library Lecture, it's on March 10th at same time, same place, and it will be Insight into Large Whale Entanglements in the Pacific Northwest from Research of Populations, Response, and Reports. So this video will be posted on our YouTube as well if you want to go back and watch it, or if you want to send it to anyone else, look for it in the next couple days. But thank you so much. You all have a good evening, and you be safe with this wild weather we're expecting if you're coming up this way.
Nice to spend the evening with you.
Thank you so much.
Good night.